Picture this. You're 10 years old. You're standing in a pitch-black bathroom, the cold porcelain of the sink pressing right against your stomach. Your heart is literally hammering in your chest, and your friends, they're giggling nervously just outside the door. You are about to partake in a rite of passage that has terrified generations. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to investigate that chilling, totally visceral fear of a childhood dare. We're unpacking the history, the psychology, and the hard science behind the legend of Bloody Mary.
Now, I gotta ask you directly, have you ever dared to summon her? Did you ever participate in this almost universal experience at a middle school sleepover, or maybe a summer camp? It's kind of incredible how this very specific shared memory just transcends geography and time. Even if you never actually went through with it, you for sure know the rules.
Okay, let's dive into this. The parameters of the famous summoning ritual are remarkably specific, but simple enough for absolutely any kid to pull off. Step 1, you dim the lights or plunge the room into total darkness, maybe light a single candle. Step 2, lock eyes with your own reflection in the mirror. And Step 3, you chant her name, usually between 3 and 13 times. The promised result? A vengeful spirit appears in the glass, ready to inflict violence, scratch your face, or just pull you straight into the darkness. So, moving into Section 1, who exactly is Bloody Mary?
Let's peel back the layers of this terrifying narrative. Our investigation really has to start with a historical inquiry to ask who the real ghost behind the mirror might actually be. We've got a few prime suspects linked to the legend, and honestly, they are all genuinely terrifying historical figures. First up, we have Queen Mary I of England. She was fiercely Catholic and earned the moniker Bloody Mary by burning hundreds of Protestant heretics at the stake, starting around 1555. Then there's Elizabeth Bathory, a 16th-century Hungarian countess who allegedly tortured and murdered hundreds of young girls. And finally, in some American variations, the ghost is Mary Worth, who was an alleged witch burned at the stake, or sometimes a local woman who was tragically disfigured. This legend acts like a giant magnet, just attracting centuries of cultural anxieties about violent, powerful, or wronged women.
That brings us to Section 2, Mirrors, Magic, and Folklore. To truly understand how this legend evolved, we need to pivot away from those historical suspects for a second. The modern game we play in the bathroom actually evolved from much older, traditional cultural folklore surrounding mirrors and magic. And what's really fascinating here is how drastically this ritual shifted over time. See, back in the 18th century, particularly in British and Scottish folklore, like in a 1786 poem by Robert Burns, young women would perform a mirror ritual on Halloween. But they weren't looking for a monster. They were actually practicing divination to see the face of their future husband. It was a romantic, albeit slightly spooky, parlor game. If they were destined to die unmarried, well, the Grim Reaper might appear instead. Fast forward to the 20th century, and that romantic divination practice has violently mutated into summoning a vengeful, murderous ghost.
Now, despite this legend feeling incredibly ancient, like something passed down since the absolute dawn of mirrors, it is surprisingly modern in its current form. In fact, the very first academic writing documenting this specific urban legend didn't even appear until 1978, when folklorist Janet Langlois wrote about it.
So you might be wondering, how does the story documented in the late 1970s spread globally without the internet? Well, it relies on a classic folklore vehicle known as the FOAF, or friend of a friend structure. Think about it. No one ever summons Bloody Mary and gets attacked themselves, right? It always happened to my cousin's best friend or a girl at the neighboring school. This narrative structure is absolute genius. It gives the urban legend this intense credibility and immediacy. It makes it feel dangerous and undeniably true, which is exactly why the story spreads like wildfire across generations.
There's also a deeply psychological reason why this story just sticks in our brains. Cognitive anthropologist Pascal Boyer proposed a theory of minimally counterintuitive concepts. Basically, our brains easily remember stories that are mostly grounded in normal, everyday reality but feature just one or two bizarre supernatural elements. Like a talking wolf going to grandma's house. Or, in this case, a totally mundane, everyday bathroom that just so happens to contain a murderous spirit in the mirror. It's that perfect balance of the mundane and the magical that makes it completely unforgettable.
Furthermore, psychoanalysts look at the bloody ritual as a really deep metaphor. Think about the demographic that most commonly plays this game: adolescents, specifically young girls. The mirror acts as a literal portal for transformation. The Freudian interpretation suggests that all the blood, the fear, and the changing reflection actually symbolize young women navigating the terrifying transition into physical maturity and womanhood. It's kind of like a safe, controlled way to process those subconscious anxieties of growing up and facing bodily changes.
Which leads us to Section 3, the brain's optical illusions. Okay, it's time to drop the scientific hammer here, because the biggest reveal in this whole investigation isn't a ghost, and it isn't just folklore. The real monster in the mirror is actually a product of our own neurological wiring. To set up the psychological climax of this explanation, we have to look at this fascinating experiment from 2010. Psychologist Giovanni Caputo wanted to test the strange face in the mirror illusion. He placed 50 unsuspecting participants in a dimly lit room and simply asked them to stare directly into a mirror for 10 minutes. No chanting, no scary stories to prime them. Just staring. And this brilliantly illustrates what happens next. Within just 1 minute, people started seeing terrifying things. An incredible 66% of the participants reported seeing huge deformations of their own face. 48% saw fantastical and monstrous beings staring back at them. And 28% saw an entirely unknown person in the glass. The data proves it. People actually do see terrifying things in the dark glass. So Bloody Mary is, in a very weird way, entirely real.
So the crucial point here is understanding exactly why this happens. It comes down to something called the Troxler effect. This is a well-known optical illusion where gazing at a fixed point in low light causes your peripheral vision to fade. Your neurons essentially get bored and cancel out unchanging stimuli. So, if you stare at your nose long enough in the dark, your brain literally stops processing the rest of your face. It blurs, disappears, and changes shape right before your very eyes.
To fill in those blurry gaps, your brain desperately scrambles to make sense of the visual static, and it ends up projecting its own terrifying imagery. I absolutely love this quote that summarizes the phenomenon perfectly. The brain gets tired of processing the mundane and, accidentally, cooks up a monster to entertain us. That is exactly why the dark bathroom ritual successfully tricks our minds into seeing Bloody Mary. You aren't summoning a Tudor queen, you're just short-circuiting your own visual cortex.
Let's wrap things up with Section 4, why the legend survives. So if we know it's all just a glitchy optical illusion, why does this matter today? Well, we don't just share stories at campfires or sleepovers anymore. That FOF structure we talked about, it's fully moved into the digital age. Bloody Mary has adapted into YouTube horror shorts, interactive video games, and viral social media trends. Digital culture has replaced communal storytelling, sure, but the core societal fears, the anxiety of isolation, the dread of the unknown, and the human need for a safe adrenaline thrill, those remain exactly the same. We still fundamentally want to be scared. Which leaves us with one final provocative thought. We know the history. We understand the folklore. We even have the hard neurological data proving that the face in the mirror is really just a glitch in our own vision. Yet the legend persists. So even armed with the science of optical illusions, why does the human brain still crave a monster to entertain it? The next time you find yourself alone in a dark bathroom, staring into the glass, ask yourself, are you really afraid of a ghost? Or are you just afraid of what your own mind is capable of creating? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning what you see in the dark.